naturopath and a nutritionist, and I specialize in women's hormonal health. So today I'm going to chat to you a little bit about perimenopause. So how do we know that perimenopause is approaching? Basically, you're in your 40s, okay? So welcome to the club. It's going to happen to all of us at some point, which is why it's so important that we start talking about it. You may have found that your periods have started to change. They might be less predictable. You might find that you're getting heavier or even lighter menstrual bleeding. Some of you might even notice that you are getting some night sweats, libido might have decreased, rage and mood swings are now a thing. This is one of the biggest symptoms of perimenopause that women in their 40s really struggle with and often come to see me about. You might be noticing more breast tenderness, even just feeling a little bit unbalanced, a little bit off at different times of the month, and these are just your hormones kind of going up and down. You might have noticed sleeping problems. Are you lying awake at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning for no reason at all? And you may have also noticed some of that unwanted weight gain around the middle, even when you're eating well and exercising. Okay, so these are just some of the signs that menopause is on the way. Now that doesn't mean that it's going to be happening in the next couple of years. You know, that perimenopausal time takes really about 8 to 10 years before it really starts to kind of kick in. And that's why I say to women all the time, if you're in your 40s, you're somewhere in that kind of perimenopausal kind of state. Now obviously in your early 40s, some women are still in their fertility years, having babies and things like that, but we're definitely still getting these hormonal changes. So with perimenopause, it can begin around about, as I said, about 10 years before menopause kind of starts, but it can also begin in the 30s for some women who have more of a premature ovarian failure. It's worth asking your mum about when she was menopausal, because your age at menopause, if you haven't had any other kind of health conditions or medical treatments and things like that, is usually very close to your mum's age at menopause. Interestingly, your age at oopause, which is basically when your good functional eggs are probably finishing up, meaning that you're less likely to have a baby, is usually around about 10 years before you kind of hit menopause. And this is really worth kind of having the conversation not only with your mum, but if you do have daughters or, you know, young kids, it's worth talking to them about, obviously at an age appropriate time, to say, hey guys, just so you know, I went through menopause at 48, you know, so it may be worth you kind of thinking, you know, maybe it's going to be more difficult for you to have a baby after, say, 38, you know, so if it's an option, maybe looking at starting a family a little bit earlier if you can. So as your egg numbers start to decline, so we all know that in our 40s, particularly late 40s, we're not going to be ovulating good quality reproductive eggs every single time. What happens is your FSH, your follicle stimulating hormone, increases because your brain, your pituitary gland, is saying to your ovaries, come on, release an egg, and that message is follicle stimulating hormone. So you'll start to get an increased level of follicle stimulating hormone, and that can be measured on a blood test. So if you are wanting to kind of see where you are in that perimenopausal transition, you might go and get a blood test. You might notice that you're, ideally it's going to be around about day 2 or 3 of the cycle if you're still cycling. You'll notice that FSH is quite high, usually above 15, and your estrogen levels are going to start to decline. Now in perimenopause, you can have these sort of really long, irregular or short cycles, more heavy bleeding. And often what happens is that women say to me, just when I thought I had my hormones kind of sorted out, when I started to get really predictable in my 30s and early 40s, all of a sudden it started to change again. The breast tenderness, the heavy periods, the PMS. And this is basically because before estrogen falls, which is what's happening after menopause, and the estrogen falls because we're no longer ovulating anymore. But in that perimenopausal time, we often get higher estrogen before it drops. And the reason for that is that every month when we're releasing an egg, the eggs that are no longer particularly good in terms of reproduction are not going to release very much progesterone. So we start to get this picture of low progesterone and then a relative estrogen excess. So you might notice things like that breast tenderness, bloating, mood changes, heavy periods, fluid retention. And most women will sort of report that perimenopausal time can be absolutely the hardest to kind of navigate, because once you're menopausal, it's all about kind of supporting your body getting used to the lower levels of estrogen. But as you're going through perimenopause, there'll be times when progesterone's low, when estrogen's high, when estrogen's low. And so you're really getting this kind of really, I guess, movable feast of symptoms that can change month to month. So it really does become about kind of supporting your body rather than trying to actually kind of like, I guess, sort of fix the hormones, if that makes sense. So I hope that gives you a little bit more info about perimenopause, how to know if it's kind of coming up, and what exactly are those hormonal changes that are happening. And, you know, I guess the more information that we have about our bodies, the more that we understand our bodies, the more that we can be prepared for those changes that are happening. And remember, menopause and perimenopause isn't something we're trying to fix. It's just a transition that we're trying to support our bodies through, like puberty. So it's going to happen at some point to every woman that you know. So it's worth getting some more information about it, knowing, being prepared, and having that conversation and making it really normal. Like puberty, like pregnancy, these are things that, you know, women go through, and we need to be there to kind of support each other as well. See you soon, guys.